Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here for the CFI member screening of the Farewell. My name is Alyssa Cox. I am the membership associate at CFI. And whether you've been around since the very first day of the Mill Valley Film Festival, or if this is your very first CFI member screening, I want to welcome all of you. And thank you all so much for supporting our organization by being a member. Without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce the MVFF Director of Programming, Zoe Elton.
Thank you. Okay, we have a great screening for you this evening. The Farewell knocked people's socks off at Sundance, and it's been moving people ever since. And I'm thrilled to introduce you to the director and writer, Lulu Wang. She's here. Welcome. Welcome to the Smith-Raphael Film Center. And I know that you're busy taking this film out into the theaters. We're thrilled that it's going to get to see, that a great audience is going to get to see it. And I'm really glad that you were able to be here. I'm going to keep track of the time because we have to get you to your next screening very, very quickly. I love that log line based on an actual lie. I mean, is that the best log line of the 21st century? It's great. Can you tell us a little bit about the lie and how the story came, how this story came about?
Yeah, so this story happened to me in my real life. I was in post-production on my first feature film when I found out that my grandmother was terminally ill, and the doctor had given her 3 months to live. But in China, they tell, which I learned later, the doctor in China often tells the family as opposed to the patient themselves, because they feel like the family member would have a better sense of how to break the news to their loved one or when to break their news to the loved one. For example, in China, they feel like you shouldn't deliver bad news at night because then the person won't sleep, and the next morning they'll be even more depressed because they haven't slept. So it's always better to give bad news very, very early in the morning, preferably when there's lots of light, so they have a full day to process it. Or, in my case, to not tell the person at all. Which is what my great aunt decided to do. She felt, knowing her older sister, that she wouldn't be able to handle the news, and told my whole family that we were not going to tell her, but that, because we all live abroad, that we had to really hurry home to see her and say our goodbyes. But how are we going to do that without making her suspicious? And so my dad came up with this idea of forcing my cousin in Japan to get married to his girlfriend. I was single at the time, so it was not me, thankfully. This kind of all came together very quickly in a week, and I was like, this is so sad. I'm grieving, but this is so ridiculous. I don't know whether I should be mad or sad or what I should do. And so I was told that I should probably not go back for this wedding because I am not good at controlling my emotions, and so everyone was afraid that I was going to give up the secret. And so that was the start of this story, was just me grappling with this, the sense of grief, but also trying to figure out if this was even ethically right, because I grew up as an American where we're taught that people should be independent and should know and should be in control of their own life and death situations.
So, yes. I think it's kind of ironic that you started making this film and, you've lived in the United States since you were 6, and in the last couple of years, as you've been making the film, lies and the truth have become such a big thing in American society, and then you have this noble lie, kind of going back to Plato, that you're experiencing with your Chinese family.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. Yes. And When you're making something that's sort of, let's say, semi-autobiographical, how is it casting the person who is going to play you?
Well, so, we started auditioning some people, and in the beginning, it was tricky because what am I looking for? Like what part of me am I trying to capture, and what works best for the story? And, because when you're like a real three-dimensional person, you have strengths, but you also have vulnerabilities. And so when your grandmother is dying, do you look for somebody who's going to be able to portray that strength, or do you look for somebody who is going to portray the vulnerability? And ultimately, I decided it was important, I guess, to find someone who could do both. And we were casting, and my producer said, "Have you considered Aquafina for this role?" And at the time, she hadn't done Crazy Rich Asians or Ocean's 8 and really hadn't done a lot of movies. Wow. And so I was like, Aquafina, that's the rapper, right? Didn't she do that music video, My Vag? It's like my little brother, he's like 11 years younger than me. My little brother introduced me to her music. He was like, she's really cool. She's kind of like, she's little and Asian like you, but she raps. And I was just like, cool, but not who I would think would be like the lead actress of a drama. And so I met with her for coffee, and she told me about how she was raised by her own Chinese grandmother because her mother passed away when she was 4. And she really resonated with the script because the impending loss of her own grandmother is so real for her, and it just brought her to tears even to think about it. And she sent in a self-audition tape, and that's how I ultimately cast her. And really, I said, she's not like me at all in real life if you meet her. And I told her, I said, I don't want you to play me because that would be an imitation. And I don't want you to do an imitation. I want you to bring Nora Lum, which is her real name, because Aquafina, in a way, is a character that she created for her comedy and her music. So I said, bring Nora Lum, the girl who loves her grandmother and will one day lose her own grandmother, bring that to the role and bring that to the experience that Billy goes through.
So what did she do for her audition tape? Are you willing to let us know?
Yeah. I hope at some point we can release it if she lets us. She's so good in it. She's really good. It wasn't actually her, like, when she was doing lines, that's not why I cast her. It was actually, she was reading lines with somebody who was off camera, and when that person was reading lines, a lot of times when actors are listening, they sort of they're on their act when they're delivering lines, and then when they're listening, they just kind of space out, or there's not a lot there. And it was those moments where she was so fully present, in every reaction, all of the emotions were on her face, just in listening. And I knew that she was the one because, as you'll see in the movie, Billy doesn't talk a lot. Like, so much of the movie is about her interiority and her internal conflict, and it was necessary to have someone that was able to carry a whole movie with that.
Yeah. I have a couple of maybe geeky questions. I'm a bird person. You have a bird in this film. You have like a little fluffy, this is not a spoiler, but you have a little fluffy bird in a couple of scenes, and I'm amazed that how did you wrangle a bird? Because we are told, not to work with animals and kids. And in my experience, most people would think that, dogs are fairly easy to train. Birds, however, are a different thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
The bird specifically? We have a dog in it too, yeah.
Yeah, I know, yeah. No, I'm not so interested in the dog. I'm interested in the bird.
The bird, well, it's VFX. Well, but we did wrangle a bird. We shot the bird on a green screen.
Right.
And so there was still a lot of wrangling, but we initially were going to do the bird on set, and we had the exact same thought. Like, we can't spend half the day. We didn't have that kind of schedule where we could wrangle the bird. So we did a separate shoot for the bird, and on set we had to lay out like green screen and stuff like that to do a replacement.
Right.
We had a sock on set. The sock became a bird later.
Wow, okay. But actually, when my bird was having some health issues, I contacted a bird psychic, and one of the things that I was trying to test whether the psychic was for real or not, and my bird had been in a film, so I asked the psychic to ask him about the film, and he said that at first he didn't like it, but then he actually really liked it because he got attention, which is what he really craved. But anyway, I'm getting off subject. Forgive me.
I love it.
What is it about Chinese culture and food? It's like I see your film, and there are rituals around food that, I think happen in every culture, but it seems like such a primary thing in Chinese culture. I also think of Ang Lee's The Wedding Banquet, and, and his earlier films as well, have to do with this relationship with food and its rituals or that kind of thing. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think the movie deals a lot with love languages, and I think one of the languages, one of the expressions of love, is not to just say I love you, but is through food. And I actually had a lot of notes. Like, I didn't think that much about the food in this movie necessarily because it's not a food movie, right?
Right.
But you can't shoot a scene without it. And so one of the early notes that I had from my producers, who are American, who are non-Asian, was they were like, there's just too many food scenes. There's so much eating. They're like, it's very repetitive. And I was like, I know, exactly. And they're like, no, that was a criticism. Like, it's too repetitive for the movie. You should have them do something else so that the audience can see more of Chinese culture and more of the city. I was like, well, what would you like to have them do? They were like, I don't know, could they like go for a walk in the park? And I was like, grandma's dying, there's a wedding to plan, you want like 12 people to go walk through a park? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? Yeah. And then we all went location scouting, and I gave them the real cultural experience of spending, a week with my family. And by like day 3, they were like, oh, we get it. Don't change a thing in the script. I get it now. It's very real.
So I was going to ask you as the last question before we watch the film, what was the difference between shooting in China versus shooting in the United States? In a way, you've kind of epitomized that with what you just said, but any other observations for our audience before we watch the film about those differences? Because you shot in both places, right? Yeah,
there's a ton of differences. For one, like, the crew they're normally working 7-day weeks, because when you hire a crew, you basically own the crew for the duration of the production. Mm-hmm. So they would rather shoot 7 days weeks so that they can finish, make their money, and go home. Because even on the days of resting, they're all in a hotel, they have a car. Even if they're local, they all have to like kind of stay. That's part of the culture. So it's very much like your temporary family. So we were doing 6-day weeks, and everybody's working really, really hard. There's no unions there, but we're shooting like SAG, and so we still were trying to abide for the most part by American rules. Right. But it's just very different there. And so the crew often, in fact, they were so on top of things that, for example, my DP and I would be talking and would be saying like, oh, this is a really great shot, but like this tree is kind of weird. What can we do? And then we turn around and then turn back around, and someone would be chopping down the tree. And we would be like, what do you do? And they're like, well, you said the tree. And we're like, yeah, but we didn't mean, oh, okay, the tree is gone. All right, let's just,
Whoa.
So you actually had to be very careful about what we would say, because I would say anything and they would call me director as opposed to my name. Yeah. Because there's a hierarchy, and the director is they see as like the head of the ship, the captain of the ship. So sometimes they wouldn't tell me no. And as an American production, I'm so used to like having an AD that would say, you can't do that, you'll run out of time. And there they would be like, whatever you want, director. But then we'd get to the end, they're like, well, we're out of time. I'm like, but you didn't tell me that, So
you didn't have a first AD when you were in China, or is it a different hierarchy?
We had one, but he didn't do the job of an American first AD who would say no and creatively help you find solutions. So we actually brought our line producer from America to be a second first AD. And so the two of them would work side by side.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any last words before we watch the film? Just other than enjoy?
Oh, from me?
From you.
Oh, I thought like you meant from the audience. No, enjoy. Oh, and I'm sorry if I lied about, I told some people earlier there was going to be a Q&A after. I was mistaken. I'm sorry for lying, but I guess that's appropriate for this film to lie to you, so.
Lulu, thank you so much.
Thank you.